Hey gang, how's it going? Today I want to talk about album mastering. Not really a hands-on tutorial, it's a little more abstract than that, but I will show you some stuff that you can do practically in Cubase that you can apply right now to get better masters. This video was requested ages ago by one of my Twitter followers, and I'm only getting to it now because I've actually had to learn quite a lot about mastering for my album, which comes out September 8th. Irradiated hamster alert. I'm excited. Before we get into it, I want to stress a few things. Firstly, I am not a mastering engineer. The likelihood of me ever being paid to do mastering work is super minimal. But I'm not trying to diminish the talents of mastering engineers either. I think the mastering process is really important. I think they do difficult work, and I think it's a really important job to, you know, having nice music to listen to, which is probably everyone's goal watching this video, I hope, in some way. However, I do feel like as an indie musician, which is what I am, we've kind of been missold about mastering a little bit, and there's a lot of lies about what the process involves and what we actually need to get an album out, and that's what I'm here to kind of clear up, really. As an indie musician, I've had to try and work out what realistic expectations are for getting an album out to the world, and the fact is mastering doesn't involve nearly as much as what articles and a lot of online tutorials would imply that it needs. So like I said, I've had to learn a lot about mastering in the last few months in order to get my album finished and out into the world. I considered going and getting a professional to do it, but I just couldn't afford it. Like, not even kinda. And it's not like it wouldn't be worth the prices I was quoted, but because I'm a one-man band, I don't have anything like the budget of 3 or more people in a, you know, a more conventional performing band. I just don't have that much money at all. I also decided not to use any of the online mastering platforms that are around, and there's like millions of them, for a couple of reasons. Partly, musicians I trust have basically said not to even bother, and that's good enough for me. But more than that, I didn't think that these websites would have the reference tracks for the kind of music I want to create. And that's not saying that I'm being really crazy and inventing new genres. It's just, I don't think they have the music that I want to end up with. And I think if you try to mix or master my album as a conventional rock album, I think it would sound naff. So I started watching videos, I started reading articles, I bought some books years ago that I finally cracked open, and I basically started gathering as many resources as I could to really try and learn mastering in very little time, or do as best as I could. Worryingly, there was very little agreement about what mastering actually involves. I think a lot of it is kind of shrouded in mystery, and we're told it's super hard. But I'm not convinced that's entirely true. There's like 3 things that all of these different resources had in common, but the articles are massive. Way more information than these 3 things. So why is that? So I looked into who was writing the articles, what websites they were published on, and what software these people were seemingly independently recommending, and I came to a conclusion. Everyone is trying to promote their own product, and you can't trust any of them. And this is exactly the same with guitar tuition. People tell you that unless you use this one specific app, you're not going to get good, or you're going to sound terrible and have terrible tone if you don't have this one specific amplifier. And it's the same in music promotion when people tell you if you're not on this one specific website, no one's ever going to hear your music, or if you're not signed up to this really expensive thing, you're never going to get your music on the radio. It's all bull, man. It's just marketing that's geared towards people who really want to be professional musicians, and they either have an ego that requires that they use the best whatever, or their confidence is so low that they'll throw money at something which they think will make them better in some way. I'm both of those people, by the way. I don't really have money to throw around. That was a bit ranty, wasn't it? So here's the actual meat and potatoes of this video. This is what I've put together from all of these different sources, as well as through discussions with musicians I trust who have been through mastering processes themselves. The following are 3 things that you absolutely have to do in order to master your tracks. There's also a little bit of what you can do and a little bit of what you absolutely should not ever do. So let's start with what you must do. You must top and tail your tracks, which basically means cutting the intro and the outro of your tracks so there's not seconds of silence before your track starts and the fade out is whatever you want it to be. Second thing, you do not want to peak over 0 decibels, and by peak we mean the highest point in the audio where it's at its loudest. We want to make sure that the absolute loudest point isn't over 0 decibels. Slightly under is great, maybe 0.04, but you mustn't go over 0 decibels, like ever. You can achieve this with a maximizer or a limiter plugin, which you can research independently now that you know the names of those things, and basically they're dynamic effects that will either bring down the highest points of your audio so they're more in line with the lowest points and it all sounds a bit more even, or they will bring up the lowest points so again it's a bit more even, or both of those things. I will usually add something like an EQ plugin set to nothing so it actually doesn't process any audio, just goes in and out without changing anything. I'll add that to the end of the signal chain and I'll just watch the decibel meter while listening to the entire track. The reason I do that is so that I'm not subconsciously distracted by whatever I think the settings on the maximizer or limiter are, so I don't think I'm hearing things based on what I see in the process. I'm just looking at the decibel meter, making sure it doesn't go over 0, and making sure my ears are hearing things that they want to hear. Maybe you're less likely to get distracted than I am. I know that I definitely am. But yeah, I just want to rely on my ears and watching that decibel meter on the EQ. The third and final thing you need to do to master your tracks is export them at whatever format, bitrate, and sample rate you need for your specific purposes. In terms of format, you'll usually want a WAV version and an MP3 version to suit different purposes, so you might want to find an MP3 converter online somewhere if your DAW doesn't have one built in. Bitrates are important for both MP3 and WAV. A bitrate is basically the number of bits of data per second in your audio, so essentially the quality. For WAV, 16-bit is standard for CDs. You can go higher if you're scoring a film, but for any online purposes, 16-bit will be fine. For MP3, 320 kilobytes per second is high, and 65 kilobytes is super low. 256 kilobytes will suit most purposes. I personally wouldn't go lower than 128 kilobytes per second. Sample rate is important for WAV files, and it's the number of audio samples per second. It might sound like bitrate, but it's not, but it does basically mean quality. You can Google sample rate if you really want to. For CDs, the standard sample rate is 44.1 kilohertz, and for any high quality audio purposes, you can use 48 kilohertz. I'll usually mix 2 versions each of MP3 and WAV, so I'll have a high-res WAV, a low-res WAV, a high-res MP3, and a low-res MP3, and that just gives me a load of flexibility for various websites and various different purposes. Let's move on to some do nots. If an instrument is too loud, or is in the wrong place spatially, or the attack on a drum feels too harsh, do not try and fix it in the master. Any EQing or effects processing you do at this point will affect the entire mix, obviously, and will almost certainly be detrimental to your master. What you need to do is go back to your mix and sort it out there, and if you need to re-record the instrument, re-record the instrument. Then you bounce that file back into your master and continue as you were. If the whole track feels like it needs an EQ adjustment and is not down to an individual instrument, then you can do that, but just don't go nuts with it. Finally, the optional stuff, which is basically any other effects. Like, depending on the genre, you could do some stereo widening, but ideally you wouldn't want to affect the lower frequencies. You want your kick drum and your bass guitar to basically stay in the center for the entire thing. So if you want to look up mid-side processing, you can go do that. You can also use multi-band compression or multi-band limiters, and what they do is they compress or limit different frequency ranges individually. That can vary a bit depending on the kind of music you're creating. So again, you can look up dynamic processing for your specific genre in your own time. Any other kind of audio enhancers are optional. Just bear in mind that you should not, under any circumstances, be using any kind of reverb or modulation effects at this point. We are strictly looking at levels, okay? Having exported your masters, you want to do the same thing with them that you should have done with your mixes, however long ago that was. You want to listen to them in a studio, you want to listen to them in a car, you want to listen to them on a mobile device with headphones, on a mobile device without headphones, and in every format and every quality you have exported. That's going to take ages, but do it. You want to make sure that no instruments sound like they're dominating, or there's no loud peaks that make you jump, or that it just doesn't sound too crowded. All of that kind of stuff. Quality assurance stuff, basically. If there's any kind of issues, you might be able to fix them in your master project, but you probably want to go back to your mix or your recording project to, you know, sort it. That is mastering for indie musicians. It's really simple, actually. I didn't even try to sell you anything. So this is the second video I've put up reasonably recently that could be interpreted that I don't value audio engineering or music production. And I just want to make it really clear that that's not the case. I'm working hard to try and become a better producer and a better audio engineer, as well as being a better musician. But I think what's happening in the music industry, especially at the lower levels that me and you are inhabiting right now, probably, I think what's happening is that music creators are being told that we need to sound amazing because that way we can be sold a product, whether it's a guitar tutorial app or a new amplifier or massively expensive mastering software or plugins or whatever. The end result of that is that we have overproduced music which has little to no musical value, which is what we're seeing in the pop market currently. And I really urge you to work on your songwriting as a craft, and when it gets to album time, make sure that you have a mix and master that's appropriate quality. When I say appropriate, I don't mean amazing, I don't mean shoddy and cheap, I mean appropriate. Can you hear the individual elements you need to? Is the track throughout a reasonable volume? And is it going to compete with other tracks that people are creating which may just be super loud? Don't get trapped into the whole loudness war thing. It's bull. It doesn't matter. Don't be a part of this crappy music machine. Write music that matters intrinsically, not because of the processing. Yeah? I avoided getting really ranty again there. I don't know if that came across. Thanks for watching. In summary, mastering is basically as hard as you want it to be. You can do really, really simple mastering like I've talked about today, like I have done for my album. And I think doing that is completely appropriate to indie musicians like ourselves. Just don't stress about it. Don't read articles that are trying to sell you stuff. And just don't do the bare minimum, but like, don't stress about it, okay? Thanks for hanging out. This has been fun. If you want to subscribe and you haven't already, that would be really cool. If you want to like the video, that does actually help. Any questions or you just want to tell me I'm wrong, you can do that in the comment section below. I absolutely encourage discussion and conversation. Just be polite about it. Yeah? Cool. See you next Friday at 4 PM GMT. Toodaloo.